I'm thinking about Steve Scheibel because it's been 5 years since he died. And I have two little anecdotes that I want to talk about. And the other day, someone who read the blog, a previous anecdote about Steve, wrote in and said that he had a story about how Steve impacted lives before Steve was a physician. And this man was a fraternity brother of Steve's and also a gymnast. And here's what he says. I wanted to let you know how Steve affected lives before he became a physician. I was a gymnast with a severe back issue. Not only did Steve teach me to be a successful student, he convinced me to find out what was the problem with my back. And the problem that was subsequently identified hadn't really been identified in that era, but he says that it turned out to be this kind of defect. But the bottom line is that Steve saved me from a life with a more serious spinal issue. He also taught me how to learn, allowing me to be what I am today. He always was a great human, and I will always see him as a friend. Those are my sentiments exactly. Now fast forward to about 1986, when Dr. Tony Fauci becomes the director of the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Diseases at the National Institutes of Health. This is Fauci's first big job now. Here he is right here. The story is that at the height of the AIDS epidemic, when Fauci took over that job, he began to put together a network, a global network of research units to study AIDS, do AIDS research, drug research, that kind of thing. And they had narrowed the list down to about 10 finalists. The University of Rochester, our infectious diseases unit, was one of those finalists. And the International AIDS Conference was scheduled that year in Paris. And our infectious diseases chief, because he couldn't travel, said, I want you and Scheibel to go to the meeting. I've set up a meeting with Fauci and talk up the University of Rochester. Tell them that we want to do this. So we went off to Paris, Valencia and Scheibel in Paris, but that's another story. At any rate, we met up with Fauci at the conference venue, and I remember he was standing on the steps of this conference thing above us, and in the background was the Eiffel Tower. It was really a very dramatic setting, and we went just a short distance for coffee and sat down and talked about the U of R research piece. We had practiced this, so I opened with, well, what do you think about the University of Rochester as a site for one of these programs? And he was kind of grouchy that day. He said, well, why would we want to go to Rochester? So I decided I'd stop and turn it over to Steve. And the idea was that Steve would engage him in conversation about AIDS research, and the details of the AIDS virus. And he did exactly that. They talked, Zoe wasn't even there. They talked for about 20 minutes, going back and forth about the science of HIV. Totally engaged. It was just amazing to watch these two brains clicking and bonding over the AIDS virus and its science. Came back to Rochester, and a month later, U of R was one of the clinical sites designated to be an AIDS clinical trials unit. And that program exists today. So, Steve, you did it.